Miguel brought water to Mr. Sullivan every day. Nobody else would. When Sullivan died, 6 military officers marched in demanding one thing: find the boy. What happened next? Unbelievable. Before we dive in, where in the world are you watching from? The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Riverside Veterans Care Facility. 12-year-old Miguel Santos sat in a quiet corner, his math textbook open on his lap. The smell of disinfectant had become as familiar to him as his own home. His mother, Rosa, worked here as a janitor. Every day after school, Miguel took the bus to the facility and waited until her shift ended at 6. They needed this job desperately since his father had left 2 years ago. "Stay quiet, mijo," Rosa always reminded him. "Don't bother anyone. We're lucky they let you stay." Miguel was good at being invisible. He watched the world move around him. Nurses rushing between rooms, doctors making rounds, and elderly veterans shuffling through corridors. But one person caught his attention. Every afternoon at 3:30, an old man was wheeled to the courtyard garden. The nurses left him alone under the oak tree. He never spoke to anyone, just sat staring at nothing. Miguel heard the staff whispering about him. "That's Mr. Sullivan, room 307. Meanest patient we've ever had. Yells at everyone. Won't eat. His family never visits. I heard he threw his breakfast tray yesterday." Miguel watched Mr. Sullivan daily. The old man looked so alone. His white hair was uncombed, his face deeply lined, but his pale blue eyes looked empty, as if all light had gone out. One Thursday, Miguel saw Mr. Sullivan's water cup fall from his wheelchair tray. The old man tried reaching for it but couldn't. He made a frustrated sound and slumped back. Miguel looked around. No nurses nearby. His mother's warning echoed in his head, but Mr. Sullivan needed help. He walked to the courtyard. Mr. Sullivan's head snapped toward him. "What do you want?" His voice was rough like gravel. "Your cup, sir." It fell. Miguel picked it up and placed it back. Mr. Sullivan stared at him. "Boy, there's a fountain inside. This cup is empty." Miguel filled it with cold water and brought it back. Mr. Sullivan drank deeply. "Thank you," he whispered. From that day, Miguel brought fresh water every afternoon. Slowly, small conversations began. "Why are you here every day?" Mr. Sullivan asked. "My mom works here. I wait for her. Where's your father?" "He left 2 years ago." Mr. Sullivan nodded. "My son hasn't visited me in 6 years." The next day, Miguel brought a granola bar. "I brought 2. I can't eat both." It was a kind lie. Mr. Sullivan took it anyway. This became their routine. Every day at 3:30, Miguel visited with water and snacks. They talked about small things: weather, birds, homework, long division. Mr. Sullivan scoffed once. "Just use a calculator. My teacher says we need to understand how numbers work." "Your teacher sounds like a drill sergeant I knew. Pain in the neck, but usually right." Miguel learned Mr. Sullivan had been in the military. He hated yellow, loved old baseball teams, and believed modern music was just noise. The staff noticed changes. Mr. Sullivan stopped throwing trays. He took medicine without complaint. He even smiled when Miguel got a B on his science test. "A B? Next time bring me an A," he'd said. 8 weeks passed. Mr. Sullivan's hands shook less. His eyes looked brighter. He combed his hair. Then came Tuesday. Miguel arrived at Riverside and did his homework. At 3:30, he headed to the courtyard. Mr. Sullivan wasn't there. His wheelchair sat empty. Miguel's stomach tightened. He found his mother cleaning near the nurse's station. "Mama, where's Mr. Sullivan?" Rosa's face changed. "Mijo, Mr. Sullivan passed away this morning." Very peacefully. The words hit Miguel hard. Tears burned his eyes. "Can I see his room?" "Miguel, please, Mama." Rosa sighed. "Room 307. 1 minute." Miguel walked to room 307. The door was open. The bed was stripped bare. The room looked empty, like no one had ever lived there. He stood in the doorway, remembering their afternoons together. Mr. Sullivan had been so alone, and now he was gone. As Miguel turned to leave, he heard something unusual, the sound of heavy boots marching in unison down the hallway. The entire facility fell silent. Miguel stepped back from the doorway as the sound of boots grew louder. His mother appeared beside him, pulling him close protectively. Down the hallway came 6 men in military uniforms. They walked in perfect formation, their polished shoes clicking against the floor in rhythm. The man leading them was tall with broad shoulders. His dark green uniform was covered in ribbons and medals. Silver stars gleamed on his shoulders. Behind him, 5 other officers followed in precise steps. Their faces were serious, their postures military straight. The facility director, Mr. Hendricks, rushed ahead of them. He was a small, nervous man who now looked terrified. He kept glancing back at the officers, wringing his hands. "General Morrison, sir, we're so honored by your visit," Mr. Hendricks stammered. "If you'd called ahead, we could have prepared." "I'm not here for ceremony." The general's voice was deep and commanding. "I'm here regarding Patrick Sullivan." "Yes, sir. Mr. Sullivan passed this morning, very peacefully. We've already begun the necessary—" "I know when he passed," General Morrison interrupted. His sharp gray eyes scanned the hallway. "I'm here to execute his final instructions." The general's gaze landed on Miguel and Rosa. Miguel felt his mother's grip tighten on his shoulder. "I was told," the general continued, "that Mr. Sullivan had a daily visitor. A young man who brought him water and kept him company." Mr. Hendricks looked confused. "Sir, I have no record of approved visitors for Mr. Sullivan. His family— I'm not asking about his family." The general's voice cut through the air. He looked directly at Miguel. "I'm asking about this young man." Miguel felt every eye in the hallway turn toward him. His heart pounded. "That's just the janitor's son, Mr. Hendricks said quickly. "He's not supposed to interact with patients. If there's been a problem—" "Is this the boy?" General Morrison asked, stepping closer. Rosa moved in front of Miguel. "Please, sir, my son meant no harm. He was just being kind. If we violated any rules—" The general raised his hand, and Rosa fell silent. He crouched down to Miguel's eye level. Up close, Miguel could see the lines around the general's eyes, the gray in his hair. "Young man," the general said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "What's your name?" "Miguel Santos, sir." "Miguel, did you visit Patrick Sullivan every day?" Miguel nodded. "Yes, sir. For about 2 months." "Why?" The question hung in the air. Miguel thought about all the easy answers he could give, but something about the general's eyes made him tell the truth. "Because he was alone, sir. Nobody talked to him. He looked sad." The general's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He stood up and turned to Mr. Hendricks. "I need a private room. Immediately. And I need to speak with Miguel Santos and his mother." "Of course, General. The conference room is— now." 5 minutes later, Miguel and Rosa sat in the small conference room. The general sat across from them, his 5 officers standing at attention behind him. Rosa's hands trembled in her lap. "Mrs. Santos," the general began, "I want to assure you that neither you nor your son are in any trouble." Rosa exhaled shakily. "Thank you, sir. In fact, quite the opposite." The general pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I was Patrick Sullivan's attorney and his closest friend for 40 years. He asked me to find the person who visited him daily. He described a brave young man who showed him kindness when no one else would—" Miguel's eyes widened. "Mr. Sullivan talked about me?" "Extensively." The general opened the folder. He kept notes. "June 15th. The boy brought me water today. First person in months to ask if I needed anything." June 22nd. Miguel read his homework to me. Kid's terrible at long division, but he tries hard. July 8th. He brought me a granola bar. Said he had extra. I know he didn't. Good kid. Rosa's hand went to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. The general continued reading. August 3rd. Miguel asked about my service. Didn't look bored when I talked. Reminded me why I believed in this country. August 20th. The boy stayed an extra hour today. His mother was working late. He could have ignored me, but he didn't. He just sat and talked. Best conversation I've had in years. Miguel felt his own eyes burning. I didn't know he was writing about me. Patrick Sullivan was a complicated man, the general said, closing the folder. He was also one of the most decorated soldiers I ever served with. After the war, he built a shipping empire. He was worth millions, Rosa gasped. But he was in a regular room. He wore the standard. He chose that, General Morrison said firmly. 2 years ago, Patrick made a decision. His family only cared about his money. His son visited twice in 6 years, always asking for loans. His grandchildren sent greeting cards asking for checks. So Patrick did something radical. The general stood and walked to the window. He liquidated most of his assets and put everything in a private trust. He gave his family exactly what was legally required, a sum that was generous by any standard, but a fraction of his total wealth. Then he checked himself into Riverside under his real name, but with no financial records attached. Miguel's mind raced. He was testing people. Smart boy. The general turned back. Yes. He wanted to spend his final days as an ordinary man. He wanted to see if anyone would show him kindness without knowing who he was or what he had. And Miguel passed the test, Rosa whispered. Your son, the general said, looking at Miguel with respect, was the only person in 4 months who treated Patrick Sullivan like a human being worth caring about. One of the officers behind the general stepped forward and placed a large envelope on the table. Patrick left specific instructions, General Morrison said. Instructions that cannot be contested or changed. Instructions that I am here to execute. Miguel felt the room spinning. This didn't feel real. The general opened the envelope and pulled out a letter. This was written 3 days before he passed. He knew the end was close. He handed the letter to Miguel. The handwriting was shaky but clear. To the boy who brought water. You reminded me that goodness still exists. You gave an old soldier hope. For that I thank you. Patrick Sullivan. Miguel's hands shook as he read it. There's more, the general said quietly. General Morrison reached into his briefcase and pulled out a second folder, this one thicker than the first. He placed it on the table between Miguel and Rosa. Before I continue, the general said, I need you both to understand something. Patrick Sullivan was not just wealthy, he was one of the most successful businessmen in this country. His shipping company operated in 42 countries. When he liquidated his assets, the trust was valued at over $200 million. Rosa made a small sound, like all the air had left her lungs. Patrick's family received their legal portion, $5 million. They're already trying to contest the will, claiming he was mentally incompetent. The general's jaw tightened. They will fail. I have 4 months of medical records proving his mind was sharp until the very end. I also have security footage. He pulled out a tablet and turned it toward them. On the screen, Miguel could see himself in the courtyard with Mr. Sullivan. The footage showed him bringing water, sitting and talking, reading his homework aloud. Patrick had me install cameras, the general explained. He wanted proof of who truly cared about him. This footage, combined with his detailed notes, makes his final wishes legally unbreakable. Miguel stared at the screen, watching himself laugh at something Mr. Sullivan had said. He remembered that day. Mr. Sullivan had told him a terrible joke about a penguin. What were his final wishes? Rosa asked, her voice barely a whisper. General Morrison opened the thick folder. Inside were legal documents with official seals and signatures. First, the general said to Rosa Santos, who works with dignity and raises her son with strong values despite difficult circumstances. Patrick establishes a grant of $300,000. Rosa's hands flew to her face. She made a choking sound and began to cry. Miguel grabbed her hand. The grant has 2 purposes, the general continued. $100,000 to clear any debts and provide immediate financial stability. $200,000 as seed money to start your own cleaning business should you choose. Patrick's note said she shouldn't have to scrub other people's floors, she should own the company. I can't, Rosa sobbed. This is too much. I didn't do anything. You raised a son with a good heart, the general said firmly. Patrick valued that more than you can imagine. He turned to Miguel, and for Miguel Santos, who showed kindness to a stranger without expectation of reward, Patrick establishes an educational trust fund. Full scholarship for any college or university Miguel chooses. All expenses paid. Tuition, housing, books, everything. Additionally, a living stipend of $2,000 per month during his studies. Miguel's mind couldn't process the numbers. They were too big, too impossible. But that's not all, General Morrison said. He nodded to one of the officers who stepped forward carrying a dark green metal footlocker. It looked old and military-issued. The officer placed it on the floor in front of Miguel. This, the general said softly, was Patrick's most precious possession. Stenciled on the side in faded white paint was a name, P. Sullivan, 1st Battalion. The general knelt beside the footlocker. Patrick wanted you to have this, Miguel. He said you earned the right to know his real story. He opened the latch. Inside, carefully preserved items were packed with military precision. On top was a folded American flag in a triangle case. Beneath it, a faded photograph showed 2 young soldiers with their arms around each other's shoulders, both grinning at the camera. One of them Miguel recognized, a younger Mr. Sullivan with dark hair and bright eyes. That's Patrick at 23. the general said, pointing to the photo. And that's James Reyes, his best friend. They served together in Vietnam. Miguel picked up the photo carefully. What happened to him? James saved Patrick's life. The general's voice grew heavy. Took a bullet meant for him. Died a hero. Beneath the photo was a medal in a velvet case, a purple heart. Next to it, another medal Miguel didn't recognize. Patrick carried guilt for 50 years, the general said. Survivor's guilt. He built his empire, made his fortune, but he never felt he deserved it. James died at 23, never got to have a family, never got to live his life. Is that why he gave his money away? Miguel asked. Partly, the general nodded. But mostly because of you, me? General Morrison pulled out a small journal from the footlocker. Patrick's last entry, written 2 days before he passed. Today Miguel stayed an hour past when his mother's shift ended. He didn't have to. I didn't ask him to. He just sat with an old man and made him feel like his life mattered. James would have liked this kid. James would have said this is what we fought for, so boys like Miguel could grow up kind instead of hard. Maybe I did deserve to survive. Maybe I survived so I could meet this boy and remember what goodness looks like. Tears ran down Miguel's face. He didn't try to stop them. Rosa pulled her son close. Mijo, you have such a beautiful heart. Patrick left you one more thing, the general said. He reached into the footlocker and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a military challenge coin, polished and gleaming. This belonged to James Reyes, the general explained. Patrick kept it for 50 years. He wanted you to have it. He said to tell you that kindness is the truest form of courage, and that you have more courage than most soldiers he knew. Miguel held the coin in his palm. It felt warm and heavy. There's a condition, General Morrison added. Patrick asked that I serve as your mentor, to guide you, help you with school decisions, be someone you can turn to. I promised him I would. If you'll have me— Miguel looked up at the general, this stern, powerful man who had known Mr. Sullivan for 40 years. Yes, sir, Miguel said. I'd be honored. The general's expression softened. For the first time, he smiled. The honor is mine, son. General Morrison stood and gestured to his officers. Gentlemen, give us the room, please. The 5 officers saluted and filed out silently, closing the door behind them. The general sat back down, his formal military bearing relaxing slightly. Now comes the complicated part, he said. Patrick's family will not accept this quietly. As if on cue, there was a sharp knock on the conference room door. Mr. Hendricks opened it, looking even more nervous than before. General Morrison, sir, I apologize, but there are people here demanding to see you. Mr. Sullivan's son and granddaughter. They have lawyers with them. The general's expression hardened. Send them in. 3 people entered, a man in his 60s wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite fit his soft frame, a woman in her 30s with sharp features and cold eyes, and a thin man in a dark suit carrying a briefcase, clearly an attorney. Morrison, the older man said, his voice dripping with entitlement. What is the meaning of this? My father dies and you don't even have the courtesy to call us? Richard, the general said coldly, your father left specific instructions. You were not to be contacted until after his final arrangements were executed. The woman, Richard's daughter, stepped forward. Her eyes swept over Miguel and Rosa with obvious contempt. And who are these people? Why is the cleaning staff in a private meeting about my grandfather's estate? Mind your tone, Jennifer, General Morrison warned. The lawyer spoke up. General, we're here to inform you that we're contesting the will. A man of Patrick Sullivan's wealth leaving everything to strangers, while his own family receives a pittance. It's clearly the result of mental incompetence or undue influence. He pointed at Rosa. This woman had access to my client's father. Who knows what manipulation occurred? Rosa stood up, her voice shaking but firm. I never asked your grandfather for anything. I cleaned his room. That's all. My son just tried to be kind to a lonely old man, Rosa continued, anger replacing her fear. Kind? Jennifer laughed bitterly. How convenient. My grandfather, a billionaire, and your son just happened to befriend him? You expect us to believe that? Miguel stood up too. We didn't know he had money. He was just Mr. Sullivan. He was alone every day. Nobody visited him. Nobody cared. You little— Jennifer started forward, but General Morrison's voice cracked like a whip. Enough! The room fell silent. Sit down, all of you, the general commanded. His military authority filled the space. Even the lawyer obeyed. General Morrison pulled out his tablet again. Since you want to discuss undue influence, let's review the facts. Richard, when did you last visit your father? Richard shifted uncomfortably. I've been busy with business. 6 years ago, the general answered his own question. December 2017. You visited for 40 minutes. Security logs confirm it. You asked for a loan to cover gambling debts. Your father refused. You left and never returned. Richard's face reddened. Jennifer, the general turned to her. Your last contact with your grandfather was a birthday card in 2019. Inside, you wrote, "Hope you're well. Could really use help with my condo down payment." He sent you $50,000. You never said thank you. Jennifer looked away. Meanwhile, the general tapped his tablet. I have 4 months of daily footage showing Miguel Santos visiting your grandfather. No cameras in the room, just the hallway. The footage shows Miguel entering at 3:30 every afternoon and leaving between 4 and 5 o'clock. Every single day. He played a clip. Miguel could be seen walking to room 307 carrying his backpack, then leaving later with his mother. I also have testimony from 3 nurses and 2 orderlies, the general continued. All confirm that Patrick's demeanor improved dramatically after Miguel started visiting. He ate better, took his medicine, stopped being combative. The lawyer cleared his throat. That doesn't prove. I have Patrick's medical records, General Morrison interrupted, reviewed by 3 independent psychiatrists. All confirm he was mentally sharp and capable of making legal decisions until his death. I have his handwritten notes, detailed and lucid, documenting his reasons for every decision. He pulled out a thick stack of papers. And I have this, a letter Patrick wrote to his family, to be delivered only after his death. The general handed it to Richard. Read it. Richard's hands trembled as he unfolded the letter. Jennifer leaned over to read it with him. As their eyes moved down the page, the color drained from both their faces. What does it say? The lawyer demanded. Richard's voice was barely a whisper. He says we failed him, that we only saw him as money, that he wanted to die knowing at least one person in the world cared about him as a human being, not a bank account. Jennifer snatched the letter. Her eyes filled with tears. Whether from shame or anger, Miguel couldn't tell. The letter continues, General Morrison said quietly. Patrick wrote that he hoped one day you might understand, that he didn't hate you. He was just disappointed. The room was silent except for Jennifer's shaky breathing. The will is ironclad, the general said. Contest it if you wish. You'll lose, spend a fortune on legal fees and destroy what little remains of your family name. Or you can accept your father's final wishes with grace. Richard stood slowly. He looked smaller somehow. I need some air. He walked out. Jennifer followed, the letter still clutched in her hand. The lawyer gathered his briefcase. General Morrison, the lawyer said quietly, I'll advise my clients to accept the terms. When they were gone, Rosa collapsed into her chair. I can't believe that just happened. General Morrison's stern expression softened. It's over now. The will stands. No one can touch it. He turned to Miguel. Your life is going to change, son. That money is real. The opportunities are real. But I want you to promise me something. Anything, sir. Stay who you are. Don't let wealth change your heart. Patrick chose you because you showed kindness when you had nothing to gain. That's rare. That's precious. Miguel nodded. I promise. 6 months later, Miguel stood in the newly renovated courtyard of Riverside Veterans Care Facility, where Mr. Sullivan's favorite spot had been. There was now a memorial bench. A bronze plaque read, In memory of Patrick Sullivan, a soldier, a friend, a reminder that kindness matters. M.S. Rose's new cleaning company had won the contract for Riverside. She now employed 5 people and paid them fair wages. She still worked hard, but now she worked for herself. Miguel volunteered at Riverside every Saturday. He'd bring water, play chess, read to patients. Other young people from his school had joined him. The courtyard was no longer empty. General Morrison visited monthly, checking on Miguel's grades, offering guidance. They'd become family, not by blood, but by choice. Miguel sat on Mr. Sullivan's bench, the challenge coin in his pocket like always. He thought about that first day bringing water to a grumpy old man. Such a small act, but it had changed everything. A nurse wheeled out a new patient, an elderly woman who looked frightened and alone. Miguel stood up, smiled, and walked over. Hi, he said gently. I'm Miguel. Would you like some company? The woman's scared expression softened. That would be nice. And so it continued. The legacy of kindness passed forward like a torch in the darkness. Because Patrick Sullivan had been right about one thing, the smallest act of goodness can change an entire world. Sometimes it just takes one person brave enough to care.